Welcome, and thank you for listening to this episode of Leaps and Bounds. I'm your host, Tom Bash, and I'm thrilled to be bringing you conversations with some of the most successful CEOs, sales leaders, and home improvement professionals. When I started in this industry 20 years ago, tearing off roofs, I had no idea about what went into making a home improvement business successful. Now, having met with thousands of contractors, helping them adopt technology, and watching them grow, I'm excited to invite them on to share what's made them successful, what they're doing today to stay ahead of their competition, and the advice they have for others. Starting a business is hard, and starting it just short of a pandemic is even harder. On this episode, I'm joined by Louie, owner of Home Improvement Pros and Legier Investments. With over a decade of home improvement experience, Louie set out to put his network and knowledge to work. We'll discuss how to get started, what challenges he faced, the role of social media, and his advice for others. Let's get the show started. Hey, Louie, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you coming on. You and I met several years ago when you were actually a general manager at Bone Dry in Louisville. So I wanted to, before we kind of dive into everything here, wanted to have you, tell our listeners, tell me, how'd you get started in this industry and what brought you to, where you're at today as owner of, Home Improvement Pros and Legier Investments.
I was like anything else. Sometimes things happen by accident. So way back when, 15, 16 years ago, I had a friend of mine that was working there that said that help as far as with some marketing. I did that part-time, and then after I graduated school, I did a sales position there and just kind of worked my way up from there. So I was there 15 years or so. And then I made the transition a little while back to, Home Improvement Pros, which is a remodeling company. And I also own Legier Investments, which is a real estate investment company.
That's awesome. I know a lot of people get into this industry either by, they actually do the installation or they have the sales background. Did you have any experience on the install side at all, with the production side?
I did not. It's if you asked me while I was in school if I'd be working for, a home improvement company, I would have never guessed it, right? But the beauty I've learned about this business over time is exactly that. It's a business, right? I mean, when you hear roofing or home improvement or home remodeling, you just imagine loading shingles and that's it, right?
Right.
My years in this field has taught me that there's a heck of a lot more to this than just loading shingles.
Right. Yeah, it's no, you make a good point. I think a lot of people also maybe a similar start like I did. It started as a summer job tearing off roofs and thinking, I think I can do this, and you start get a crew together and you start subbing out, and then you start selling, and before you know it, you've got a DBA or something, and you're at it. Now with Home Improvement Pros, are you still more on the, I'll call it like the operations side?
When you start your company, it's all hands on deck. So it depends on what day. So it's some days I'm selling, some days I'm picking up trash, and some days I'm helping install. It's we kind of just operate as a team to get customers taken care of.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, what does the day to day look like for you? What are you doing at Home Improvement Pros? And then maybe if you want to get into the Legier investment side too. I know you do a lot with rentals, and I think you're in the Airbnb market now as well. So maybe if you'll give us a little more insight into what exactly that kind of day to day looks like.
Yeah. So from the Home Improvement Pros perspective, it's one of those things where I do a lot of job site inspections to make sure that customers are taken care of, to make sure we're staying on track. And then sometimes too, if we get backed up on sales appointments, I run sales appointments just to make sure that we're getting to as many people as possible. So I love a challenge, so I decided to start two different companies right at the same time.
Nothing wrong with that, right? Does Home Improvement Pros, is that just exterior? Are you doing interior as well, or?
It's interior home remodeling mostly.
Okay.
When everything in the inside, the bathrooms, kitchens, etc. So.
Okay. Hanging drywall and all that.
Correct. So drywall, paint, anything on the home, realistically, we can help take care of.
And then what's it? Maybe tell me a little more about, from a sales and marketing side, I think you mentioned you have some other folks selling as well with you?
Yeah, I mean, but from the sales and marketing side, it's realistically, I've been able to build up a good referral base over the years,
Right.
contacts. So that's helped drastically. I mean, we're fortunate that, people have reached out to us for appointments, et cetera. We haven't had to, knock on doors or anything like that. So it's just that philosophy of taking care of people and then, creating that relationship. And if they're in need of something, they're more likely to call you to at least take a look at it. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but we've been fortunate in that manner.
Now, Louis, I think, I'd be remiss if I did this podcast with you and I didn't ask you about social media. You,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think for a while there, I woke up every morning and I'd see a nice post from you that said "Good morning."
Yeah. Yeah.
What was or what is kind of your strategy behind social media? Is it raising awareness or kind of what's your mission with that?
Well, I mean, it's the whole 9 yards, right? So, like, we've been very, very fortunate throughout the years to use. The beauty of social media is it's cheap, right? I mean, you can
Yeah,
connect to a large group of people, and you don't have to increase your expenses. So typically, and I still do it to this day, it's more to talk about, the industry, to talk about real estate, to talk about home remodeling, to talk about being an entrepreneur. So I'm big on trying to get as much information out as possible. So that's really my goal, is to stay as connected to the right people, to help motivate them to get the information and see what they like and see what they want to explore.
yeah, and there's probably a lot of people that are listening to this that maybe in similar shoes where they've worked for a company for a while, they've built up some good relationships, and maybe they're looking to venture out on their own. What was that journey like for you as you made that transition?
Yeah, I mean, the transition is quote unquote scary, right? But it's like anything else. At some point, you're just gonna have to take a chance on yourself. And to be honest with you, when I got deeply, deeply into this in 2020, that's when I started both my companies, and then the virus happened, right? So
Yeah.
the stuff that I learned the last 4 to 5 months on just pure survival and how to keep pushing through and working hard, I've had enough lessons in the last 4 to 5 months, the last, 10 plus years. So I'm over the lessons at this point.
Yeah, that's they say some good companies start during these kind of economic downturns, if you will.
Correct. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with that, man. It just, it keeps you thinking, it keeps you working, it keeps you thinking outside of the box, most importantly. I mean, but to answer your question, the number one thing in anything is just get started, right? There's only so much reading you can do, so much videos you can watch, so many people you can talk to. I mean, the best experience is always going to be action.
What would be that, if you let's say you had to drill down to one or two things, what would be that, first couple things that you need to do to actually get started?
I mean, I believe in doing things the right way, right? So make sure your business is right, whether it's an LLC, et cetera. Just make sure, your licensed business to be able to operate in the particular city that you're in. And the other thing, the question I get to this day is people always ask me, I have a lot of companies that reach out to me through my social media. The next big question is leads, right? How do you get leads? And, the simplest answer is to start with your friends and family and see if they are in need of anything that you can help them with. But getting started is just making sure you're a proper business. There's nothing like spending a bunch of time on things and then find out you're not a regulated business in your city. So
Right. And Louis, you're in Louisville, right?
I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. And I know a lot of different cities have, states, I should say, have contractor license requirements. Some have different insurance requirements. Did you know what requirements were needed just from your time of being there, or did you have to seek out those type of resources and information to find out what exactly you needed in your area to get started?
I mean, I pretty much knew since I've been here for a while. But I mean, the beauty of starting a business during these times is there's not much information that you can't get very quickly with a simple Google search. So information's at our fingertips. I mean, as far as needing to know what you need to do, I'd recommend obviously everybody, because it, like you said, it changes from city to city. So I'd recommend everybody just kind of research their own particular city. But I knew, and it's not that difficult, right? I mean, the way that it's very, I don't want to say easy to start a business, but from the paperwork standpoint, it's nothing that's stressful or frustrating to actually start it and make sure, it's a legal entity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so, when you get started, I imagine you're wearing multiple hats, right?
Yeah.
You're the CEO, you're the sales rep, you're, maybe a project manager. You're all over the
Right.
place. When you look to, hire that first employee or that second employee, that fifth employee, what are some of the areas that that you found that you needed, help in? Was it on the sales side, the production side?
I mean, to be honest with you, at least from my perspective, I mean, when I'm looking at team members, first thing I'm looking at is the actual character of the person. I mean, it's the simple things, right? It's do they show up on time? Are they a good representative of your business? Because you can teach what we do, right? And most things can be taught. So I'm more on character. But as far as planning for the business specifically, um, my biggest background is from sales, right? So I know the sales, but I also know the production. But I like to hire different than me. So my skill set is to sell the product, talk about the product. But I typically look for production as far as the first hire to be able to supervise the crews, etc. Now, if you come from a production background and that's your strong suit, you can take it apart, put it back together. Maybe sales is not your strong suit. So I would suggest looking for somebody a little bit different than you so you can meet together and be a good team.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. That's great. So, what are now that you've I'd say your experience is a little unique, having been going through the pandemic with this business. But what's it been like the last 5-6 months, and versus expectations?
Yeah, I mean, the last 5 6 months, again, I've fallen in love with entrepreneurship. So the last 5 6 months has been very rewarding. Yes, it's been very, very difficult, especially the first couple months of the situation, because nobody really knew, what was going to happen and how, right? So, but I'm a big factor on, I strongly believe in trying to learn from every situation. And I just can't, I wish it didn't happen, but I'm also glad for the education that I've gotten doing this. So, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of businesses start doing hardship because it just teaches you to be strong and fight back.
What are some of those things that you've learned?
I mean, first thing is, don't give up, right? I mean, you got to keep pushing until the end. I mean, even when it gets hard, keep trying. That's the number one thing. It's entrepreneurship or home improvement or real estate. Sometimes they'll kick you in the face. You could either stop the business at that point and say I can't do it, or you can keep pushing through. I'm one of those believers that says that you know it's not failure if you're learning from it. That's just one of my big philosophies. But it's to keep trying, keep knocking, and keep doing the things and stay the course and keep learning. Right? I mean, don't be afraid to get mentors and other people that you can talk to run things by them and see what's worked for them in the past.
Yeah, that's a really good advice. Do you there's a lot of education out there, and a lot of it can come from industry experts. I think manufacturers of material are put out a lot of good information. Where do you seek out information when you're trying to grow the business?
Like you said, manufacturers, suppliers. I mean, those are all great resources, and you'd be surprised how many other company owners will respond back to an email or a LinkedIn message or Facebook message. I mean, I think a lot of people in our industry, especially those that've been successful, are always looking to help people. I mean, so I would say that too. Don't assume that someone's not going to help you because they're in the same business as you're in. So I would say reach out to some other people in the business.
Yeah, it's a good point. I remember when I was selling roofing, I'd reach out to realtors. They were sort of an untapped resource for me, and they'd have referrals, they'd have homes they're selling that they needed to have something fixed on, and so they were a good source of business or leads for me. When you I kind of want to go back to the marketing piece of this and the social media. As
Uh-huh.
a new business, I think you mentioned this, that it's basically free, right, to get the content out there. But how do you provide the right content? I think there's there's a line there, but that you can draw between just putting out a message, and then putting out meaningful content that is going to increase engagement and brand awareness and those type of things. So what type of content should you be posting, and where?
So I'm kind of in the middle of those two spectrums that you talked about. So I think what scares people away from social is sometimes people can overthink the content. I mean, because they want it to be so perfect that they end up not posting anything at all.
Yes.
Social media is more of consistency, right? It's as long as you're consistent, it's just as fast as it can help your business. It's a world that forgets about you very quickly, right? So it's one of those things where if you're consistent with the message, as far as, and also to put stuff out there that's helpful to people. So we're talking about home improvement, from time to time, whether it's before and after pictures or some information on, the top 5 things that to look for when buying a house or selling a house, and something that helps the overall group. I think, in my opinion, also too, I think another factor is people use social just to put just their pictures out there, and that's all. But
Right.
it's really film. It's not so much for the consumer, right? I mean, there's a middle line between that, but again, I think the biggest thing is just to stay consistent. I mean, it really doesn't take that much time, right? I mean, it's all about getting it out there and getting that information. And that's the other thing too that people will bring up. Oh, it takes too much time. I assure you, it doesn't. Just try it and stay with it, and then don't overthink content.
Yeah, I think it goes back to your earlier point about just getting started, right? Just get started doing
Correct.
it, start posting, and it'll become consistent. So long as you get started, and start putting that message out there. How do you differentiate a message between say a LinkedIn and Facebook? I mean, do you there are different audiences there, so do you tailor your message differently based on the platform that you're speaking to?
I do slightly. That there are some that do it more than me, as far as they don't do the same post on each platform. I mean, I'll change up maybe some of the language, and let's say like a LinkedIn, right? Because that's more of a professional site and that type thing. But I still post some of the same thing on Facebook. It's just one of those things where you're gearing towards different audiences. So I recommend, there's a bunch of them out there these days, right? But I typically stick to the Facebooks, the LinkedIn, and those types of groups to get information out. I don't spend that much time on trying to come up with the best message for each platform. I'm a numbers person, so I play the game as far as, Facebook has what, 1 billion people on it. I think they said LinkedIn is now at 500,000, and it's got millions and millions of active users per day. I mean, you only got to get a small percentage of that to notice your business in order to start generating leads. What you want people to do is think of your company when they need something, right? I mean, it's not a
Right.
immediate thing, but if you're consistent with the message, it's going to come to their brain. Oh, hey, I saw that home improvement pros company. Let me try and reach out to them, see if they have availability.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think people often want to post things that, hey, call us today for a free estimate. But if you're
Correct.
more consistent in showing your work and showcasing what you're doing, and even how you're doing it, and being kind of that educational resource, it's, you'll get that kind of um, uh, you'll get those folks that aren't interested today or don't need your services today, but they've seen your consistent message over time, that when they do need your service, they're going to remember you and reach out to you.
Correct. And then the other thing, our industry, those that get it, right? I mean, but we also need to put a lot more focus. Some companies need to put a lot more focus on the reviews, right? I mean, reviews is just the
Yeah.
way of the world. It's just one of those things that people just look at, right? I mean, nobody wants to be first. They want to see that other people have used you, are happy with you. That's the quickest way to get a phone call or a message on social, as far as them reaching out to you. If they see happy customers, they're gonna take a chance, as far as at least allowing you to give an estimate.
Yeah. Now, are you interested in more of the quantity of reviews, or are you directing folks to, one platform over the other to leave those reviews?
Yeah, so I mean, it's quantity and quality, right? But also honesty, right? I mean, it's one of those things where the biggest platforms is obviously the internet, as far as Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it's not just, to be honest with you, just great reviews all the time doesn't really help you. I mean, it's good to find some things that you can work on, even if it's a positive message. You want to continue just growing your company, right, and growing yourself. So I think that, obviously we all aspire for positive reviews, but I'd say those platforms are the biggest impact. I mean, the Google is the power that be, right? So most people, when they're looking for a company, they Google it. That just is what it is. And Facebook's also strong in the searches too.
Right.
They use kind of style as Google. So I would say it's whatever you're got to start somewhere. I mean, I think where people go wrong is they try and do all of these: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Google. They try to do it all at once, and then they get overwhelmed and they should stop doing all of them.
Yeah, because it can get it can definitely be overwhelming.
When now I do it consistently without even thinking about it. But when I first started it, I would just put a little timer on my phone, right? I mean, it's just a post, right? And Facebook, the best time to hit people on Facebook is about 7:30, right? I mean, whether it's healthy or not, first thing people do, or most people first pick up their
guilty.
phone. Yeah, and they see your message right away, right? So that would be the time to really kind of get that message out. And, you're talking twice a day if you just want to start, maybe do a little bit more. But let's just say you did it in the morning and then midday. That really doesn't take time because you never know who's looking, right? Lunch is also a big time for social media.
Yeah.
While people are eating lunch, they're searching. So you just hit those time zones consistently. If you hit those two things, you will accidentally get business.
Right. That's good advice. I want to talk a little bit about the production side of things, and I've talked to several contractors, and one of them told me their hardest thing right now is hiring employees, and that's both on the production side, but also on the sales side. And then also, I recently heard that there is soon to be a shortage of like ice and water shield, and so love to get your take and kind of hear what you're hearing out there relative to the kind of the production concerns.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say the biggest thing is distribution. So there's a shortage on nails, ice and water. There's been a shortage on wood. There's a lot of things that we're used to. We got spoiled over the previous years, right? If we wanted something, we'd go to Home Depot, Lowe's, or wherever and just picked it up, right? And then now it takes a little bit more planning these days to really do that. As far as hiring good team members, unfortunately, that's not just our industry, right? That's just the world that we're at right now. I think us as contractors, the number one thing that we can't be afraid of is teaching. Don't be afraid to find somebody that doesn't come from the industry or is not we all would love that team member that's already trained, good to go from day one, but for the most part, that really doesn't exist, right? I mean, when I started in the business, I didn't know anything there was about home improvement, and I certainly have never been on a roof before starting in the business. So look for somebody that's got qualities that you like and believe that could be good for your business, and take the time to train them. I mean, just have them be with you for a few weeks, and taking that time that might seem like it's slowing you down can get you a good team member for years.
Louie, for you, what does that training look like? What does that entail?
I mean, I believe strongly that the best training is out in the field, right? I mean, I just don't think there's nothing wrong with classroom time, because you got to do that too. But I think it's really just observation, coaching the person and then mirroring what you're doing. They're absorbing it just being around you, right? I mean, I would say the first couple days or week or so is really what I call about your company. What's your philosophy, what you stand for, how do you want to treat customers, and just really allowing that team member or potential team member to really see what you're all about. then it's the meet and greet, right? I mean, introduce them to the crews, to if you have office staff, to the office staff. I mean, just kind of incorporating them into the team properly. And then also too, it's if they're sales, go with them right along to see, this is how we should run appointments. If they're production, just this is the processes and procedures. I mean, so different aspects, but I do think the field training is the best training in my opinion.
Yeah. How do you retain that top talent too? How do you keep them there with you?
It's a competitive world, right? I mean, it's one of those things that, like, look, I mean, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to leave, they're going to leave, right? I think the biggest thing is there's a lot of people out there that are not just focused on money, right? If they generally like your company, hopefully love your company, like what you stand for, and they feel good about what they're doing. I mean, that's how, in my opinion, people stay at companies, because they want to help that company. They want to help that individual. And, also too, I think it's good to get to know. I get it. A lot of companies will preach, don't cross the line from personal and work, right? But I do think if you get to know somebody personally, as a friend level, there's a time to be friends, but there's a time to work. It's a thin line. I get that. But if you grab somebody's heart to where they want to help you, I think you're more likely to keep that team member.
Yeah, it's good advice. I think there, especially in this industry, there can tend to be a high churn on employees. So I think if you take the time to really find out what your employees value and treat them right, that that investment you make into them will pay dividends. I wanted to know, how having started your own business out, how do you go about choosing who to partner with, whether it be material manufacturers, distribution, technology, whatever it may be? How do you go about choosing who's going to be that partner with you in your business?
I mean, obviously, it's one of those things where past experience helps, past relationships helps. But let's just say you're brand new to it, just starting out. I mean, I would say take the time to meet people, right? The only way to see if you have interest is to meet with that person and talk to them. I mean, and I'm one of those believers too that I like to do business with people I like. I mean, there's nothing worse than having to meet with somebody and you're dreading it, right? So, if your personalities match up, if the product is good, I think that's at least the first way to gain interest in it. And then it's got to accomplish the goal that you're wanting to accomplish.
Yeah, helps solve a problem. I know we talked a lot about the home improvement side. I wanted to, just for a few minutes here, talk about the investment side, and how'd you get into that space? And I think the Airbnb market's really interesting, kind of short-term rental, I guess. How'd you get into that market, and why?
Yeah, so I've always had a passion for real estate. I mean, I got some long-term rental properties under my Leisure Investments umbrella, and then recently, about a year ago, after researching and just digging into it, I really dove into the short-term stay rental space, right? I mean, currently right now I think I'm up to about 52 units. It's one of those things where, you get to provide a great experience for people, and typically you get more bang for your buck in a short-term stay, right? It's one of those, and again, I got to use the word typically. It's a bigger space. A lot of times you got a kitchen. If you want to cook, you got a refrigerator. And the biggest thing is the whole family can stay in one unit, depending on size, instead of getting multiple hotel rooms. You got to go from room to room, and all of that typically costs more. So there's a drastic need for it. And, it's what's called the sharing industry. I mean, the sharing industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? I mean, from sharing vehicles, from sharing lodging, from it's not going anywhere. We just live in a world where people don't have to own everything, right? They don't mind staying somewhere where it's a night or two and then going elsewhere, that type thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I find it even more interesting. You started this, and then a couple months in, or however long it was in, the pandemic hit and travel kind of ceased. And what are some of the impacts you're seeing on that? Are you still seeing people that want to go to one of your properties? I imagine, for myself, if I'm looking for somewhere to stay, I'd find that as a much more uh, attractive option versus going to a hotel where there's a lot of different people. But curious to hear, what your experience has been like so far.
I mean, obviously, the pandemic had an effect on everybody, right? I don't think any company can really deny that unless you're the Amazon of the world, right? But the great thing about the space, right, it's not just from a travel for fun type thing, right? I mean, we made partnerships with some corporate sponsors, and we've also made great partnerships with some realtors. I mean, the market's real hot right now. People putting their houses on the market, it's flying off, and then they're homeless, right? So, that's when it's great to have a short term stay for a couple months. You've made a tremendous amount of money because the average, I think, at least in our city, is 15 to 30% above asking.
Wow.
And you don't have to sleep out on the street, and you were able to capitalize right away on that offer. Typically, it's multiple offers that's coming, right? So, that's been big for us too. So we thought outside the box on how to provide. It's really solving a problem. That's what we focus on, and I've been fortunate enough to have several investors from around to really want to continue scaling this. So our goal is to do this in multiple cities, not just Louisville.
That's really interesting. And I knew some people that every year they'd buy a house as a rental property income. Is this something that you started a while back, where you got interested in kind of the investment space, or was this something new for you?
I mean, about 5-6 years ago, I started with my first rental, right? But again, like I said, I've always been interested in real estate. I was reading all the books, like we talked about earlier, doing all the Google searches, doing all the YouTube stuff,
Yeah.
but going to investment seminars, and it was consistent message that everybody kept saying, get started, get started. So I bought my first long-term rental property. I mean, it was one of the scariest things ever, right? I mean, but I still own that house to this day. I mean, I now have 5-year tenants in it, and the education that I got from buying that house has really gotten me to where I am right now, to where drastically scaling the business. Leisure investments, we flip properties, we do long-term rentals, we do the short-term rentals. So we're pretty well diversified. But I got a lot of sentimental value towards that house. And,
what made it scary? There's gotta be a story behind it.
I mean, the scary thing is you're now buying a rental property that you've not bought before, right? I mean, then you worry about, am I going to get a tenant? Are they going to destroy the place? And am I going to be able to pay for that? I mean, that little house there was, when I first put it on the market, I got a 3-year tenant. They lived there 3 years. I now have a 5-year tenant, because the other tenants had to move back to their city, because their work transferred them. Now I have a 5-year tenant, right? I mean, and the other thing too, if people are interested in this real estate space, I do believe that there's a big difference between a landlord and a slumlord. So I really take care of my people. So, the properties that we have for long term, people don't typically move out. And the other thing that I also recommend to people, because sometimes it's, let's get somebody in there as quick as possible.
Right.
Well, I'll let one of my houses sit empty 30 days, 60 days, 90 days until I find that right tenant. It's not that I want to waste money, but I know it's hard to get somebody out of the property, and it's also hard fixing things that somebody has damaged, right? So, knock on wood, the last 5-6 years, all the long-term properties I have great tenants, and some of them have became friends. And one of my tenants actually works for me, so it's been great in that aspect, to where it's not somebody I knew from the past either. They rented one of the houses for me. Wanted to have a career change, asked about home improvement and how to get involved, and he's been great.
Yeah, that's a good story, and also really good advice, I think, for those that are kind of in this space or looking to get into it. I think learning through your experience there is super helpful. As we wrap this up here, I wanted to ask you, We talked about a lot of different things, and one of them being get started. But what advice would you give to new contractors, that have started a new business but are looking to grow? So they got started, they've got their feet wet, they're starting to do some things. What advice do you have for them as they're looking to take that next step and grow the business?
I mean, the best advice that I would say is, growth is great at a proper time, right? Properly evaluate, do you have the systems in place to be able to take the additional business as it comes, right? There's nothing worse than, as they say, be careful what you wish for, right? Let's say you're hoping for more leads, and then all of a sudden all the leads start coming, but you don't have a sales team to get there in a timely manner. So you have to protect your name, protect your brand. It's great to want to scale and scale rapidly. Just make sure you do it at the proper time. And then the other best advice I've gotten throughout the years is, I think it's more of an overall advice is, don't expect other people to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself. You're the first person that has to believe that, you can do the business and you can scale it. And then over time, others will follow suit. But it's not that hard to expose when somebody doesn't believe in what they're doing. And I happen to love my two businesses, right? I'm fortunate enough to wake up every morning and love what I'm doing. And, hopefully people in the contracting space or real estate space are enjoying it also.
Yeah, that's great advice. Yeah, you really do have to love it. And I think it shows. It definitely shows in the efforts that you put out. Well, awesome, Louie. This has been really good. It's always great to talk and to catch up and to hear, what you're doing today and the challenges you're facing and how you're persevering. And so really appreciate the time. I'd encourage everybody to go follow Louie, certainly on LinkedIn, but across any of the social channels would be great. Louie, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate you guys. And, everyone out there, just keep pushing. It's been hard for everybody, and together we can laugh. So let's do what we can.
Absolutely. Thanks. Well, that'll do it for today's show. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode of Leaps and Bounds. If you did, be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review and subscribe to the podcast. We look forward to bringing you more exclusive conversations with some of the most successful home improvement leaders. If you're interested in learning more about Leap, be sure to check us out at leaptodigital.com or follow one of our social channels. Until next time, see you.